Pro tip: hit record. I might start the podcast there. Doesn't matter. Right. Hello and welcome to Heroic Inspiration, my YouTube show where I talk all things TTRPGs with a range of wonderful guests. With me today is a woman who's neither Fae nor a flower, despite her many names, Diana. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I know. I get asked about the name all the time. I chose the last name completely randomly. People are like, "Oh, do you really like elven creatures?" And I was like, "I mean, they're fine, I guess." And then same thing with Diana the Rose. People are like, "Oh, you must really love roses." And I'm like, "Actually, I'm more of a snapdragon girly." Oh man.
Diana or the Snapdragon, or Diana Snapdragon sounds pretty cool.
Character limits are kind of a
Character limits.
pain, but
Honestly, for SEO, it would be an absolute nightmare because you'd have like the name and then the entire titles. You can't SEO that.
no.
SEO is very boring.
God. Yeah, welcome back to the SEO podcast. Let's just talk
Welcome
about
to the
that for
SEO
a while.
podcast. It's
On the
horrible.
cusp of the downfall of TikTok. Let's do that for an hour.
But the good news is that Google completely messed up their own algorithm, so nothing really works there either.
Lovely. I love to
Yay!
hear that. Oh, anyway,
Getting rough out there.
tabletops.
Tabletop.
Happy things.
Yes. We're all fine. Um, this has
Man,
gone so
this is
quickly
fantastic.
into there were no rails. Railroading. No, we're not talking about railroading. We're going to be talking about reflavoring stuff,
Yes, I
which is
love reflavoring.
something I know you're a big fan of, and it's something I'm a huge fan of because I like being like, do you know what would be cool? Zombie made of blood that explodes when it dies, and I'm
Yeah.
like, this
Oh,
isn't a
that is
thing.
cool.
Okay, well, this thing is blood related, and this thing explodes when it dies. I'll just smush them together.
Exactly. Oh, yeah,
So yeah,
100%.
that's how I tend to do it. But why do you like reflavoring things so much?
So I do it a lot both as a DM and as a player. Mostly on the player side, it's just because I have a really cool concept of an idea, and I'm like, man, there's no spells that look
Mm,
cool with this aesthetic. There's no like. Actually, speaking of blood, I had a character once who may or may not be showing up in an AP here soon. Who her entire magic was either bioluminescent or blood related, nothing in between. Two very weird ends of a spectrum, and obviously there's a lot of like light-ish spells in D&D,
mm,
but like they're described, Fairy Fire, for example,
yeah.
it's described as being either, purple, green, or I think one other color. And I'm like, oh, I really want red though, or blue. And then so I, that can start as simple as changing the color of something, or it can go to the entire opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, I had a same character who's channeled divinity. I believe she was a conquest paladin, had this fear aura, and
Mm,
I made it so that if there was blood on the battlefield, it would start coalescing and pooling upward in a very like Death Stranding sort of way,
that's very cool.
reverse gravity sort of way. And that's obviously not part of the spell description, anything like that. But I was like, you know what? This is cool, and I'm going to make it happen whether the rules is written like it or not.
Mm,
So a lot of the time I do it for character stuff. On the other side of the DM screen, though, when I do it for DM stuff, it's for the sake of making a module feel new, even
mhm.
if someone's played it before. Curse of Strahd is a very good example of this because everyone and their mother has played Curse of Strahd. And so you have to play it if you haven't already. Oh my god, it's so good. Um, but since everyone's played it, I usually have a mixed bag of players who are like, half of them have played it, a couple
Mm,
haven't. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to rename all the characters. I'm going to rearrange some of the plot points. I'm going to, especially reflavoring characters
mm,
in the game, NPCs, to make them instead look and act like NPCs from each individual player's backstory. And all of a
yes.
sudden, like, yeah, nothing functionally changes. And it's so easy to do. It takes like 2 seconds of, editing a sentence here and there, but then it makes it so much more real for the player. It
Mm.
makes it feel like it's been tailored to them. So it's one of my favorite things to do and teach people.
When you're doing it as a DM, do you like edit stuff and write stuff ahead of time, or are you doing it on the fly in reaction to stuff?
I it's usually I write it ahead of time. Obsidian, the note taking software, is my best friend. So I will quite literally copy and paste PDFs of the modules that are 100% legitimately given to me, and then I will go in and edit all the reflavor text, or all the flavor text. Usually
Mm,
add a couple sentences because as written they tend to be pretty bland,
mm.
and I hate improvising. And so yeah, I usually go through and do like at least one sweep of almost every word in the module and tweak it a little bit.
You've obviously reflavored stuff. You said you've reflavored Strahd multiple times. Is there, if you, what's like the wildest reflavoring you've done of that?
Ooh. Oh, okay. So in Curse of Strahd, I it's more of a tweak
Mm.
in mechanical senses as well. But in Curse of Strahd, there's an intro module called Death House, and in Death House, the basement has the final boss. Spoiler alert: is I believe it's a shambling mound.
Okay.
Maybe it might actually be something else that I changed into a shambling mound.
It's a shambling
But
man now. We've
yeah,
reflavored it.
sure.
It's too
Whatever it
late.
was as written is like insanely high power. It's some
Yeah.
CR5 creature, and
Okay.
in that module, you're CR2 when you encounter it, or you're level 2. And I was like, this is going to kill them. And so I changed it into 2 creatures, one of which was a flying horror, and the other of which was a gazer. Obviously, a gazer doesn't really belong in a gothic horror type
Mhm.
campaign, so I reflavored it to look like and this might hurt for a parent to hear, so I'm going to be very careful saying this, a ghostly, like semi-embryotic child that was growing and developing a little bit as the um like combat progressed. So every round it got a little bit more and more humanoid, and so the gazer's beams were reflavored to seem more like, a spectral or bloody type attacks. And it was all worked into the story in a certain way, and they had no idea it was a gazer. I think I never told them. And then the flying horror was reflavored so that it had like a big gash down its stomach and wriggling fingers along the gash. It had like wings made of sinew and woven together bits of flesh and stuff like that. So it was just, I turned up the horror a little bit for it, and they said it gave them nightmares afterwards, which is my goal.
That's all
So
you want. I want, my aim is always to emotionally devastate my players at some point, or to have
yes.
them sweating bullets during the combat.
Hmm.
I am a firm believer in all but the most inconsequential of fights should
Yeah.
nearly kill my players every
Oh
single
man, you're one of
time.
those DMs.
I didn't think I was, and then I ended up in the DM seat, and I was like,
You got a taste of
that
power.
was fun.
Yeah. Yep. It happens to everyone at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I need to close an app because it just made a noise. Go away, app. Right. We are professional here at my YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, I definitely just reached over to my work laptop and just made sure it was muted real fast. Professionals.
Look, I work on the exact same thing I play on, which is the exact same thing I create content on.
Oh yeah. It all blurs together. We're all
Yeah.
work from home. It's fine.
Super good work-life balance.
Oh yeah.
How
If
do you
my boss
reflavor
is
your
watching
work-life
this, I'm so
balance?
sorry.
That's not that.
Oh man.
That's incredibly cool. I don't run modules. I run mostly like well, entirely homebrewed campaigns, and I mostly play in entirely homebrewed campaigns.
Yeah.
So the reflavoring tends to be more of, like I said, of monsters or specific abilities.
Mhm.
The favorite one I've done was I tweaked a monster that was like the incarnation of the hatred the players had caused in this,
Oh,
which was, it ended up, the first form it took was this snake entirely made up of like half coagulated blood that
nice.
erupted out of the mouth of a boar they killed.
Oh.
Had them all make saving throws as it left, and then they were feared or they slept. They gave them all nightmares basically if they failed. That was the first time they did it, and basically this thing ended up being the big bad, sort of. Eventually, it started collecting body parts from all the things they'd been killing, and it created a body for itself, which it stuffed into the skin of one of the PCs that died.
Oh my god.
So, which was a player who dropped out. So his character died, and then he dropped out, and it wasn't my fault. It might have been my fault, but it made for a good story beat. So it caught up with them in this friend's skin. I'm relatively good at mimicking other people's voices, so I
Oh
mimicked his
man.
character's voice, and it just peeled its flesh off. It peeled the skin off, and then like spider leg came out the back of it, like this warforged arm came out. It had one elemental arm, and it had
Oh.
two hands in front of it that were covering its face
Mhm.
because it was horrified by what it, like the physical form was horrified by what it was, and it was being puppeted by this horrendous monster.
Oh my goodness. Wait, what stat block did you use for that?
I can't remember. I'll have to look it up.
Oh man.
It was something that could
That's
teleport, and the main thing I did with it was I reflavored the teleport so that it was only from pools of blood.
nice.
So it would slip into a pool of blood and then reappear out of a pool of blood. And it had a charm effect, which I reflavored as just being full mind control. So the player
Oh.
would like have to attack one of their friends or something,
Uh-huh.
The campaign ended because with one of the players who rolled lowest on the final wisdom save being essentially fusing with it and ending up becoming the bad guy, basically. And they all
Oh,
fought. One of the players ran away because he found out something integral to his backstory and just bolted because he was like, what have I been doing? This is horrible. And then the last two fought it out because I gave the player who'd been infected a curse where he could hear human heartbeats within 200 feet, but
oh,
like
that's a huge.
deafeningly loud.
Oh,
And I was like, and because we all play online, I was just messaging him on Skype like, the sound is unbearable. Like, you want the sound to stop. I wasn't telling him to do anything, but I was giving him these prompts, and he's a very good player, so he ran with it. Yeah.
oh,
Unfortunately, it does mean that because we play in this homebrewed world, that character is now running around. It's
just like
terrifying.
trying to stay away from society
Yeah,
and
yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. Oh,
And just
wild.
being very evil. But yeah, so that was, I think, I can't remember why I reflavored. I'll probably be able to find it somewhere at some point. Um, I have
That
got
is so cool.
notes. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of reflavoring things and then bringing in aspects from other creatures, I think. So I guess it's homebrewing, but it's like very lazy homebrewing.
It really is. It's homebrewing for people who don't feel creative, which is
Yeah,
my favorite thing.
yeah, I'm 100%. Um, is there a time in which you've reflavored something and you kind of regretted doing it on like the inverse of your best ever?
Oh, I I feel like sometimes I reflavor things or rename things when it's just wildly unnecessary. I like will take every single NPC in a module like Curse of Strahd or in some other campaign, some module. I did Wild Sheep Chase one time, which
Hmm.
was it's a wonderful low level, very intro level thing to run as a DM and to play as a player. And it's just a one shot at level 4, I want to say. For those who are curious about getting into D&D, that is a very good starting point. Wild Sheep Chase is fantastic.
Level 4's good.
But yeah, and none of my players had played it before, but
Yeah.
I still felt the compulsion to go through and rename every single NPC, gender bend some NPCs, full on like change up the race representation
Mm.
or the species representation a little bit, things like that. And in the end, it was just so much work, and we ended up doing it as a drunk shot. As so like it didn't really matter. No one remembered anyone's names. It was just pointless as far as work goes. But there was nothing more that I had put into the world that I, immediately regretted as
Mm.
far as like player reaction to anything yet. I'm sure it'll happen. But
You have to find the boundaries, and at some point that means going over them accidentally and being like, I'm really sorry about that.
yeah, yep. Thankfully, I'm pretty good so far about things like consent forms and things like that. I've definitely had to reflavor something and then walk it back prior to a session start because, like, I had one player one time who had to think about eyes. They worked at like an optometrist's office, and they had this visceral fear of eyes being, like gouged
Mm.
out or popped or injured in some way. And so they came up and they were like, "Yeah, sorry, I can't do anything like this." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's totally fine." And then turned around and like instantly rewrote like 7
Sliding the
paragraphs.
entire module
Just
into the bin.
we're fine. That's great.
And
That's fine. So, but yeah, that's about the closest I've come to an issue like that. Thank God.
I mean,
Um,
that's why the safety tools are so important, especially because it
yeah.
sounds like you're very horror themed generally.
Yeah, if you were to look at my bookshelf right now, I'm in the middle of a series where I'm posting every single TTRPG that I own.
Mm.
That's not D&D related, all these indie games, and 90% of them are horror games. I think the first one I started with was a sentence. The intro sentence was, "Hey, no matter how many content warnings I give you for this game, it's not enough." And so, like, and then it just spiraled out from there.
That's
So
a
I have a lot
sales
of horror
pitch.
stuff. Yeah.
No amount of content warnings will ever be enough for this game. So,
Yeah. Anyway, here it is. Here's where you can find it. Here's a link.
do you think safety tools are more important with horror stuff than they are with anything else? Because you're
Oh yeah.
deliberately trying to push the boundaries?
And
Mm.
people complain a lot about like the concept of safety tools being like a
Mm.
stopping point. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to use safety tool." Like if you need a safety tool, like, you shouldn't be in
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
campaign. And it's like you're kind of thinking about it wrong, where it's like I now know exactly where the line is,
Yeah,
which means I can get right up to that point.
yeah.
Um, so it helps. It helps more than it hurts.
100%. I view it as a right. Okay, so I can't do these things, but it means anything else is on the table. Like if you've
Mhm.
not told me I can't mess with like this other thing, then I'm
Yeah.
going to.
Yep. Exactly. 100%.
It's just fun. Also, um, What's the longest module you've run that has been reflavored then?
Ooh, you know, I think it would have been Curse of Strahd, honestly.
Mm.
So I had gone through, and thankfully that was easy. I just did like, for the most part, it was names. So I gender bent Strahd and renamed her Estrada, and things
Nice.
like that. Made her Latina, because of course. And then for the most part, it was names, and so I just, you know, Control F and then find a replace sort of things. And so that was pretty simple. I think once you get into the swing of things, it's a lot easier. And then from there on out, when we actually approached like session prep, I would go into that particular session's monsters and then
Mm.
reflavor them as I went. So the big stuff I did ahead of time, small stuff as I went. But I think I played that campaign for about a year, maybe. It's hard to remember now. It ended up fizzling out, but I still have the paperwork. I could do it again.
As so many campaigns do, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Is there are there any modules that you wouldn't reflavor because you think they're just right?
Oh, I think anything from a third party that my party has not encountered before. I think I wouldn't bother. Especially if it was already a horror game and I didn't need to do much
Mm.
reflavoring. So, for example, Mana Project Studio, I'm pointing over there because that's where just off screen all of my books are, has a fantastic module called Children of the Moon,
Mhm.
or it's a supplement, and it's all about lycanthropy and werewolves and things like that. And it's an Italian studio, so they kind of toy a little bit more with mature themes than you would
Mm.
expect for their culture is just different enough that they have some really intense like mature themes in there,
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, this is kind of perfect as is, and it's so obscure that none of my party would know it, so I would just kind of like drag and drop and call it good. So I think it has more to do with what my party has already experienced, because a lot of my reflavoring has to do with
keeping it fresh.
things that they're, yeah, basically. But that's on the DM side. On the player side, I reflavor everything, even wildly unnecessarily. Every single spell has like a description that I spit out whenever I cast it for the first time and things like that.
It's got to
So
be done. It's
yeah,
got to be done.
the theatrics.
Of course. I mean, that's what D&D's for. Being
Yeah.
overly dramatic,
Hmm.
obviously. um, if you were going to give someone a tip, like one singular tip on how to reflavor something, what would it be?
Ooh, if it's something like a character, I highly recommend Pinterest. Pinterest is like the source of almost every single visual that I use to guide how I'm going to reflavor something in my games.
Hmm.
Even when I create a character for the first time, I usually start with just a color, and then I'll go into Pinterest and I'll search like, purple aesthetic, and then see what pops up. And a lot of times it's like, pictures of purple sparkles or purple flowers, or, stuff that has been color graded in a very purple-y way.
Mm.
And then I just pick whatever seems to look cool, and where I'm like, oh, that's a really cool idea
Mm.
for, magic missile. Maybe it's like a blast of, purple sparks as opposed to darts or
Yeah.
something like that. And so really, I recommend using Pinterest as like a visual source of inspiration. And I've used it for creatures on the DM side as well, where I look up just horror monster concepts or
Mm.
like concept art. And then we'll usually just sneak that out of there, paste it into my notes, and I'm like, all right, great, this is my creature. Um, and so, yeah, it's just stealing, really.
Start with Pinterest. I've heard that a lot actually as advice. I think Pointy Hat talked about finding an aesthetic and kind of building around aesthetics as well.
Yeah, it's fun.
Um,
And it feels really cohesive, even though you're changing something entirely,
yeah.
it's good.
Well, I think as long as you've got that core theme at at the center of your character, and I think a lot of people do character building. I mean, obviously min maxing, even with min maxing, to be fair, um, there's usually a core vision you have for your character, and if you can tie that in with an aesthetic or with a color or with like a theme of some kind, it just
Yeah.
helps the character be more memorable. Um, yeah, so you have your. I want to know about the bio. Why is it bioluminescence and blood for your paladin?
This character, as written originally, the very first iteration of her was a pirate. It was for a piracy campaign that
Okay.
we did in 5e. And so she was a cultist to a god of murder, I
Hmm.
believe, but she was hiding it from the rest of the party. And part of her work as a cultist and as one of their assassins was kind of hiding who she was. So all her
Yeah.
low level spells looked like bioluminescence, just because that was part of her personality, was
Right.
kind of wanting to explore the horizons a little bit beyond the open ocean and run away from her former cult past. But at the same time, she still worshipped the blood god, so she's still stuck to the bloody spells for
Yeah.
later on. So yeah, it was cool. The Pinterest board for that one was all over the place.
I mean, that's very cool. Uh, I how do you go about reflavoring stuff for martial classes? Because I think with magical classes, it's a little
Ooh.
easier because you
Mhm.
can just be like, the magic is pink now,
Yeah.
and that's that, or the
Uh-huh.
magic is glitter. Um, Whereas with hitting things,
Mm.
it's a little harder to do. So how do you go about doing that?
I haven't done it yet for myself, but as a concept, one thing that I would start doing is, I mean, it depends on the martial class and it depends on the weapon.
Mm,
First of all, the weapon that you wield can look like whatever you want. You can make it look like it has, a bunch of runes in it, even if the runes do nothing. You
yeah,
can make your great sword look like, full on just rock, and
yeah,
ask your DM if it can do bludgeoning instead of slashing
yeah.
damage and see if that works. So weapon wise, I recommend focusing on that. I also recommend if you're a martial class along the lines of a monk or that you specialize in unarmed attacks, or anything that can be, kind of flavored to be an unarmed attack if you
Mm,
want to, or have unarmed pieces
yeah.
lead up maybe. Look up different fighting styles in real life. Full on, like, Matrix style, like, I know jujitsu,
Yeah.
full on search something, take a look at some videos, and, try and get some techniques from there. You can even look up diagrams of like step by step how to execute certain moves, and then look at those descriptions, and then full on read from it as if it were a script when you're describing your attacks. Same with different fighting styles. If you're going to do like, what do they call it, sword and board and
Yeah.
things like that. Look up different techniques, copy them, and just straight off.
Mm,
That's how I would do it personally.
mm.
And then maybe if you have a character where you're like, oh, I don't want them to be super like martial class. I don't want them to be like super by the book. Then make it so that they cheat a little bit and they throw dirt in someone's eyes. And that's, does it do anything? No. Is it part of the flavor of the attack? Sure. Do
Or
whatever
maybe
you
that's
want.
how
Have
they
fun
got
with it.
advantage, right? Like maybe they throw dirt in
Yeah.
the eyes, and that's how they, that flavors your lucky feet into how you've got your advantage for that attack, or if you've got
Yes.
other
Yeah.
accuracy or something. Yeah, flavor is free, and it's something that does get said a lot, but
Mhm.
it's also something that I think with newer players and newer DMs, it's kind of scary.
It can be. And I'm not sure why that, I think maybe to some degree people might be afraid of sounding too like basic,
Mm,
where they're like, oh, I made my first ever D&D character, like they're super, one eye is blue and one eye is or like bright gold and they both glow, and it's like you're level 1. And it's a little cringe, but at the same time if you lead into it and you make it so that you develop flavor over time, even if
yeah,
you start off building a character as a new player and you're like level 1 and then you decide to add more flavor
yeah.
as you go and as you level up, then that works even better for the narrative, honestly. So yeah, don't be afraid of it.
I did that with. So I first played D&D like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, some amount of time ago. Time
uh,
is tricky to keep track of. Not only with kids but also just in life.
yeah.
And my character was the typical half elf rogue, super
Oh yeah.
grumpy.
Edgy, no parents, no friends.
I didn't enjoy playing him. It really hampered my enjoyment of. I enjoyed the game and the DM and the players, but the character, I was like, this guy's an idiot.
Yeah.
um, and when I started playing again, I had just seen the Barbie movie. And I was like, I'm gonna make a himbo called Ken, and that's the
Yes.
character concept. So he was an elf who had a he's got a keytar, which
Nice.
it's just a
Okay.
magical keytar. It fell from the heavens at some point, smacked him in the head. He's an absolute idiot. He's got 8 intelligence.
Oh my
Very
god.
charming, but accidental instead of being in like intentional. So he's accidentally charming because people are like, oh, um,
Cool.
yeah,
I love that.
it's
I also
great.
feel like everyone's kind of got to go through their first cringe character at some point. It's part of the
Just get it out of the
process.
way.
Yeah. Welcome to the game.
Get it done. Get it done. You'll feel better afterwards. But
Yeah.
yeah, I came in with and I think this is something I really like. It goes to what you said about adding flavor to a character as they level up. That was literally the concept. I had no backstory outside of that. And as we went through, I was like, okay, well, this guy's kind of a pacifist. He wants to talk about spreading the good word. His mum's just like, you have to be nice to people. That's as complicated as he is. And if you're going to make a character like that, it's so much fun because they get so traumatized so quickly by the reality of
Yeah.
a D&D campaign.
Oh, I love that. And then you kind of work into like, oh my God, are we the bad guys? Like, is
Yeah.
my entire worldview so wildly wrong? Like, what is mom gonna think? That's
he
oh,
we got captured in like the second session. We got taken to a dungeon, and as we were going through the dungeon, one of the characters is a star spawn, so he's
Oh, yeah.
which is awesome. But he's been reading about the world instead of actually learning about it. So he saw a
Mhm.
room full of goblins, cast spike growth, killed them all. Some of those
Oh.
goblins were children. Ken was horrified. I was
Oh,
horrified.
yeah.
But the character, Badatis, was just like, no, they're goblins. They're evil.
Mhm.
It's like, no, they're living things. Like, living things aren't just evil. That's not how this works. And those two characters get on really, really well, which is really funny because Ken will do something stupid. It's like we were on this caravan thing, and Ken was just watching the trees go past like a dog. Is how I flavored
Oh.
it. And Badatis started doing the same thing to see what he was trying to accomplish. So there's this astral elf and a wood elf just sat on the back of a caravan going like this.
That is the
It's
funniest
amazing.
thing. I love that so much.
But yeah, adding flavor as you go is great. You don't have to stick to the character concept you have to begin with. You can build on it, and I think that's the
Yeah.
most fun thing you can do.
Mhm.
I'm a little jealous of people that can write like 300, 300-page backstories and stuff.
I've definitely been that person. Oh man.
I'm
I've
genuinely
done.
jealous.
It's a curse. I've gone to the point where I will get asked to do like shows or games or things like
Mhm.
that, and I'll hand over a massive backstory, a character playlist, Pinterest board, potential character arcs where I'm like, if you wanted to push my character a little bit evil, here's a trigger for it, and then I'll just do this afterwards, and then you could do something along these lines. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, there you go. And they're like, are you sure you don't want to just DM? And I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, I'm good.
Sure, you don't want to DM and you're there sweating. I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Just shaking a little bit.
Sniffing the top of the DMG just to like, I'm fine. It's fine. Are you sure?
Yeah. Just reach over to a poster of like Matt Mercer's face. Just be like, it's fine.
I have
Everything's fine.
failed you. Like the locker scene from, oh no, you're young. This might not register. Like the locker scene from
Oh,
Dexter's Laboratory.
haven't seen it.
Yep.
Oh. Sorry.
Reflave myself to be young. It's too late for me. Oh, we've lost the trail slightly. Not a huge
Oh, as always,
surprise.
I fully expect it from this show.
I don't know if I'm going to take that as
In the
a
best way.
compliment. I talk to so many people with ADHD. It turns out when you're like, hey, I want to interview creative people, it just means you're talking to people with neurodivergency.
Yes, it's an echo chamber of no one getting anything done because
Yep.
everyone's like, oh my God, this is my special interest. Oh my God, that's your special interest too. It's
And you
so
just
much fun.
bounce off each other.
Yep.
Until you end up like in the stratosphere going, wait, what was the question?
Yeah. 100%.
It's a joy. If you were going to suggest a module for someone to reflavor as like their first one to reflavor,
Ooh.
what would it be?
Oh, I kind of want to say Lost Mines. Lost Mines of Andover is very famously like one of the more introductory modules when you're a DM and when you're a player. It's like the one that I point new DMs to because I'm like, it's especially when you're new to learning the game, it's very easy to run comparatively, and you start off with very basic creatures. The very first fight is spoiler alert for the first fight of a module that's been out for forever. Is you get ambushed by goblins. I think the chapter is literally called Goblin Attack or whatever, and so spoiler. But I think it'd be cool to kind of mix it up a little bit. Maybe it's kobolds instead, or some other low CR creature. One of the easy ways to do this, by the way, and I don't know if this still counts as reflavoring, but little pro tip when you're a DM is you can switch out, for the most part, any creature of a certain CR level for a different creature of that same CR level. And outside of pack tactics and other special cases where, sometimes boss monsters and things like that, you don't want to do that with.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like you can just switch things in and out. You can even go to like a supplementary module, something from Kobold Press or whatever, and swap in something that's not even originally from D&D, or reflavor the goblins to be something else from some different, themed game. Maybe you want to completely reflavor Lost Mines to be an eldritch horror game. And I don't know. I think it's a really easy one to start with because it starts off very basic and it gives you a very clean canvas to work with. So I like that one.
Which one would you not recommend trying to reflavor?
Huh. Ooh, what's the Giants one? Storm King's Thunder? That would be
Maybe?
hard.
I feel like Wild Beyond the Witchlight would be really hard as well. I feel like there's a lot of chances for
Ooh.
small reflavoring, but the overall
Yes.
theme is quite hard to mess with.
That's true. I also feel like ooh, can you imagine that just taking place entirely in the Shadowfell instead of the Feywild?
That'd be sick.
I haven't read the campaign that much, but like Man, I feel like it'd be fun only because the whimsy of the Fae in general is pretty easy to just be like, it makes it easy to hand wave almost anything.
It's really easy to change the whimsy of the Fae into being something really sinister, and I think
Yes.
it's something that I have a lot of fun with because I actually did a Fae circus in one of my campaigns, and every price for everything was determined by dice rolls. So anything that they asked
Ooh.
for, I just rolled some dice, and that was how much it cost. So some things are like wildly overpriced, some things are wildly underpriced. They got some really weird magic items that don't really do much. They got like the pom poms of cheering, which give temp health to someone equal to your charisma modifier once per long rest.
I
It's
love
really
that.
basic. Like it's not going to do a huge amount, but it's so much fun. That's a homebrew item. The difference between reflavoring and homebrew's tricky. Technically, reflavoring
There's
is just a
barely a
different
line.
description, right?
Yeah, honestly, I've
Technically.
taken like magic items and things like that and just changed like the damage type. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I guess this is did I just homebrew
Is
something?
that
Ugh.
homebrew?
Yeah. Like, ugh.
There's a weird line here. Well, I'm not here to. We're not here to get into the semantics of it. There's no reason to do
Yeah.
that. So but the two definitely go hand in hand, and I do think
Mhm.
whatever level of DM you are, I think even if you are starting out, don't feel scared to just do that because it's fun.
Yeah.
If you're like, no,
Inspiration
I'd
comes
rather,
from
like you said,
everywhere.
if you're like, oh, I'd rather these were kobolds, like just do that. That's fun.
Yeah. No one's stopping you. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna oh, I almost made a joke about the Pinkertons. I'm gonna not do that.
Shut it down. And then hold on, there's a knock at the door.
Cut that. Good God.
We've just filmed it. How did you know?
Anyway.
For legal reasons, that was a joke.
That was 100, please.
I need to genuinely decide if I'm going to keep that.
Wizards, if you're watching, I love you so much. Please don't hurt me.
Please don't hurt me. Mr. Coast, please. I have kids to think about. Oh, man.
But yeah, I mean, chances are your players are not going to know what the original creature is anyway. You know, they're just happy to have a DM. Do whatever you want. Mess with them however you want.
That's such a good point. Players are just happy to not have to DM. So
Yeah.
many people are just happy not to have to be the DM. You can do what you want.
Mm.
I put up with a lot.
Yeah.
As long as they get to turn up and do stupid voices and roll some dice, they're usually happy.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's all of the general stuff that I was going to talk about.
Amazing.
So, this is going to be out in maybe at the end of the month. Maybe at the beginning of next month.
Cool.
Is there anything you'd like to plug with that in mind?
Man, so I think by then it'll have been announced and teased. Actually, I think it's coming out like later this week. That I am part of. Speaking of the character that I was talking about, when it comes to Blood and Bioluminescence, it's going to be a little bit different this time around. But I'm playing her as part of Madeline's Chains of Asmodeus campaign. I am a main character in a campaign, like a long form campaign for once, which is so exciting. I am also guest starring on Forgotten Paths, which is a lovely audio only podcast, a D&D 5th edition AP that features an amazing GM, Noah Downs, and a cast of wonderful, super talented players. And I was supposed to come in for like 2 episodes. I think I've been on 17. That character is fantastic. Basically, yeah, just round up a bit. It's like, exchange rates, basically. But then outside of that, I think by then my new podcast will have been announced, which is Worlds Apart. We're kind of taking it easy on that one, so release timelines aren't super set in stone. But if you want to watch me world build in real time with my friend Odin, also known as Odin's Son or officially Odie on some platforms, it's very casual. We sit down, we world build, we teach our processes as we go, and the world that we build will be used in an AP down the road. So full on, you're going to watch the entire process of being a homebrew DM start to finish, despite the fact that I proclaim to hate homebrew. Odie is dragging me into it. So check that out. Beyond that, it's a lot of the usual stuff. By then, I'll be planning for PAX East, which is going to be coming up in May, so I will be there. And then, other than that, I am streaming 3 times a week, back to my normal schedule. I'm on all platforms except for TikTok, depending on how things go, or including TikTok. Yeah, I know. Like, if you could just like come back in editing and then splice out whatever the correct answer is, because we've been going back and forth for weeks now. I'm tired. Everyone's tired. Maybe I'll be there, maybe not. But I'm Diane of the Rose everywhere.
There we go. This one ends with finger guns instead of waving.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Oh wait, no, wait. I
Oh,
nearly forgot. Thank you for making time. I really appreciate
yeah,
it.
of course.
As
Now
I
we
said,
threaten each other with finger guns, right?
Yeah, ready?
Yep.
Go. That's right.
Oh, you're supposed to shoot.